Welcome back to Update X, where I'll tell you what's been going on in the crazy world of video games over the past week. Uploaded every Monday morning on YouTube and podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm your host, Brandon Reshitar, at Twitter, or at The Only Resh on Twitter, and basically everywhere else. Today's update 6.5 for June 29th, 2020, where I'm going to tell you about some first impressions of gameplay from Cyberpunk 2077, a new Halo Infinite teaser, a recap of the Avengers War Table stream, and more. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the Halo teaser that came up and confirms the Banished are going to play a part in Halo Infinite. So the words Halo Infinite weren't on the teaser anywhere, so some people were joking, this means Halo Wars 3 confirmed. But there's no way this doesn't mean they're a main enemy in Halo Infinite. So close to the July news for Halo Infinite and the release of the game, there's no way they would start talking about Halo Wars 3. So it's a very safe assumption this means they're talking about Halo Infinite, not any kind of Halo Wars 3. So I'm grabbing specific details from Austin Goslin at Polygon. So last Wednesday is when it was posted, and Halo's official Twitter page and YouTube channel posted a video of a WAV file, which just had an audio transmission and didn't really show anything visual. And it was a Brute's voice, and I'm going to paraphrase what he says in the 1:10 long audio transmission. He says that forces occupy the ring, that humanity will burn, and there will be no more prophets, no more lies, and ending with, we are his will, we are his legacy, we are the Banished. And Halo fans that haven't touched anything Halo related since Halo 5 are probably a little confused or just don't see anything that significant with this teaser because they don't know who the Banished are, because that's the only game they've really came up in is Halo Wars 2. So they were the primary antagonist in that game, and they're an enemy faction like the Covenant, made up of brutes, hunters, elites, grunts, and engineers. But as the mysterious voice in the teaser mentions, the Banished don't believe in the prophets or their great journey like the Covenant did. Instead, they are, or were, led by a brute called Atriox. In the main campaign of Halo Wars 2, Atriox fights the UNSC when he and the Banished occupy the Ark. Later, in the Halo Wars 2 DLC called Awakening the Nightmare, Atriox briefly unleashes the Flood, but manages to destroy the Proto-Gravemind and stop a larger outbreak. Flash forward to the Halo Infinite teaser, and it appears that something about the Banished may have changed. The Banished now seem to be in possession of a Halo ring themselves, or might be hours away from occupying it. Based on the mention of, quote, his legacy, it seems that Atriox may be dead and the Banished may be under some new leadership. On the other hand, it could also be Atriox himself speaking in the video, but statements like, we are his will, would be pretty outside of Atriox's general philosophy in the series so far. So this doesn't give us too much info other than a confirmation of an enemy faction in the game, but thankfully we don't have to wait much longer with Xbox's first party event happening sometime in July. They haven't given a date yet. And hopefully in that event we're going to see a substantial amount of Halo Infinite's story and some gameplay. I have thought about playing through the Halo Wars games multiple times. I've started Halo Wars 1 a couple times. I haven't finished either of them. And with my massive backlog of games I'm trying to get to anyway, I started watching through the cutscenes of Halo Wars 2. So at least I have that, if nothing else. But I do believe they're on Game Pass, the Halo Wars games. So if you want to get into those and get caught up on the Banished, mainly in Halo Wars 2, you can go ahead and do that. The next story we've got The Last of Us Part 2 is breaking sales records. So I'm getting the info from the PlayStation blog. It says, we're delighted to report that The Last of Us Part 2 is now the fastest selling first-party PS4 exclusive ever, with more than 4 million copies sold as of June 21st. Now, if you remember, the game released on June 19th, so it sold 4 million copies in 3 days. And I'm pulling more information about it from various sources because I had to go all over the place to get certain numbers. So until now, Uncharted 4 held that record, but The Last of Us 2 beat it by just 1% during its opening weekend. Uncharted 4 also being a Naughty Dog game, they are such an incredible studio and always make massive games that are almost 100% of the time going to be very successful. And another thing to keep in mind, the numbers don't include digital sales. So the 4 million that it sold is just physical copies, which is insane because that's so many more digital numbers that we don't even know of in these reports. I got mine digitally, and now with many people buying only digitally now. That's insane. Um, I I don't know why exactly they don't include those in the statistics, or if they don't keep track of them the same way or what, but yeah, it's even more incredible thinking about how many digital copies it sold. And not only does the game hold that first-party PS4 exclusive record, it's also the biggest physical release of this year across all platforms, selling 40% more than the previous number one, Animal Crossing New Horizons for Switch. So it didn't just beat the previous number one by like 5 or 10%, 40% more than the previous number one. That is insane. I beat the game a few days ago finally, and I'm going to go into a little bit more of my thoughts later in the episode when I talk about what I've been playing. But yeah, I'll just get into that later. That'll be in like 20 minutes I'll talk about that. After that, we've got some Cyberpunk first impressions. So the Night City Wire event happened last week, and some people in the industry got to play a 4-hour preview of the game, and they have a lot to say about it. I'm grabbing info from multiple sources again because a good handful of people got to play it. So what they got to play is just from the prologue of the game, and overall, the game has been described as an extremely deep open-world RPG, where you have an incredible amount of choice with your character customization, dialogue options, how you form relationships with characters in the game, what playstyle you want to have. It's all up to you and how you can live your cyberpunk story that you choose, and I'm very excited to have this level of personalization in this cyberpunk story. And some of the customization details, there's a quote from a Kotaku article by Alex Walker that says there are customization options for skin types, hairstyles, eyes, eyebrows, mouths, jaws, ears. There's 5 types of teeth. I don't think I've ever played a game with customizable teeth, but this game has that. Cyberware, scars, tattoos, piercings, makeup, 3 types of nipples, I guess. If you remember stories from last month or the month before, when it first came up that you can customize your genitals in this game, there's 2 dick types, 1 vagina option, dick size options, and 5 types of pubic hairs. Sure, because why not have that higher level of customization for it? According to the Kotaku article, you can disable nudity if you want to. That might just be for that customization screen. I'm not entirely sure, but there is nudity in this game, but apparently, in some capacity at least, you can turn off the nudity. And going into the gameplay a little bit, I think there will actually be a lot of replayability as well. Not only because of how you can choose to act in the game, but with the 3 different backgrounds you can choose from for your character. So it's got Nomad, Street Kid, and Corpo, which is like a corporate background you can choose. And I think the option that you pick here only really affects your prologue for the most part. I think generally the game will play out fairly similarly after that, aside from some dialogue options you get based on your background, and certain relationships you can probably have with other characters in the game. The Nomad branch lets you start out in the Badlands, which is the surrounding area outside of the walls of Night City. As a street kid, you're used to being in the slums and living that urban jungle life. And as a corpo, you navigate the skyscrapers and high risks of the Arasaka cutthroat company politics. So, street kid and corpo sound more interesting to me. I don't know if I'd go with the Nomad before either of those two, but that's just me. And going into the story a little bit, again, regardless of which background you choose, you inevitably do meet with this character Jack to set up a plan to acquire this cybernetic chip that is the gateway to eternal life, supposedly. Because I think with the street kid, you already know Jack, and he's your friend that tells you about this, and I think if you choose the Nomad one, you end up just running into him one way or another. And Jack gives the players jobs and contracts to earn money so they can modify their body and push their bodies to the limits to get their hands on this chip. So just giving you busy work, I guess, to gain some money to buy upgrades for your cybernetic whatever else with your body. And when I say busy work, it doesn't mean it's necessarily meaningless, because there is a quote from the game's lead quest designer, Paulo Sasco. He said this during the Night City Wire event. He said, "You won't find any filler in this game. Everything has a meaning." So side quests and every NPC and all the other people you talk to They all have a meaning. They all have effort put into them. They all have character and their own personal life that's going on. One thing that Paris said, Paris is one of the guys at Gamertag Radio who got to play the 4-hour preview. He says it's a very lived-in city, and there's always stuff going on, whether you want to be a part of it or not, because you'll be walking around and there will be a shootout happening between a gang and some cops or something like that, and you can either jump into the fight and shoot whichever side, or you can just go on with your day and they're going to do their own thing. You are very much in this lively city, and that excites me a lot, actually. As far as the combat goes, it's a first-person game if you didn't know already. I heard the shooting feels good in it. Again, another quote from Paris. He said, "This is an RPG played in first person. It is not a first-person shooter at its core." And he said once he realized that and kept that in mind as he was playing the game, the gunplay did feel a lot better when he recognized the game for what it is. It's a great way to word it. There's also hand-to-hand combat and some melee weapons. And in some of the footage from the Night City Wire events, I saw some damage numbers come up, like the floating damage numbers when the player shot at enemies. I'm not sure if you'll be able to toggle that off or not. I know some players don't like floating damage numbers in their games, but that is one thing that I noticed in some of the footage I saw. And for the dialogue, there are dialogue options kind of similar to Fallout, where you can get some more info or context in the conversation, or just get to the point. And it looks like the context options are white, and the options that progress to the main point of the conversation are yellow. Also, similar to Fallout, there are options specific to your background, and maybe options you can use depending on your skill level. Like if you're a nomad, you have some specific dialogue options, or if you're a corpo or a street kid, you can have some different dialogue options because of your background. So that's another interesting replayability and personalization option there that I appreciate. And talking about the skills, because you're going to have skill trees and skill points to use in this game, I was listening to Blessing from Kinda Funny talk about his preview experience. He said you have stats to put points into, and the different stats groups that he saw in his gameplay was body, reflex, intelligence, technical ability, and cool. One of the stats is cool. That's what it's called. I'm not sure what exactly that entails. He compared that system to the special system in Fallout, where you allocate different points to similar groups like that. And he also said each of those attributes have their own skill trees within them that you can allocate points to unlock different perks and abilities. He said in one of them, once you get to a certain level of points in that skill tree, you can unlock knife throwing and whatever else. Things like that, generally. So basically, they want you to be able to play the way that you want and cater to whatever play style you want to lean into. Again, I don't need to beat the dead horse, but very personable, customizable story you can play with this. And they went over a new gameplay mechanic called Brain Dance, which is a recording of someone else's experience that you get to see, hear, feel, and all of that through their perspective. The character you play as, V, says they could feel the person's pain, fear, and stress like it was their own. And then you can go into an editing mode within Brain Dance, where you go into a free-flying camera and you can fast forward, rewind, pause, zoom in, scan items, and look at everything happening around that person during the event as kind of an investigative tool to see what happened or get some kind of lead to some other quest you're on. So you get a lot of tools with that to investigate. Blessing, another thing he said about the Brain Dance sections, he said it felt kind of tedious and took a while to find what he was supposed to get to within the Brain Dance recordings. So hopefully it's, done a little bit better by the time the game comes out, because it did sound like they want to put a lot of focus on Brain Dance in the game. And they also announced Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which is an anime by Studio Trigger, set in the Cyberpunk universe, and it's set to release on Netflix in 2022. So they're definitely they're in the mindset that Cyberpunk is going to have some legs, and people are still going to be interested in the world and still playing the game 2 years from now. The anime will also take place in Night City, but it will have new characters and a new story. Also, if you get the game on Xbox One or PS4, you will be able to play it on Series X or PS5 at their respective launches. Now, that means it'll be compatible. It doesn't mean that's the next-gen version that is more created for the next-gen hardware. That just means you can play that game on the new system. There will be free upgrades for both next-gen systems, but they will have more info on that one soon. If I remember right, the upgraded next-gen versions of the game will not be ready at the launch of the consoles. They didn't really have a time frame for when that'll be ready, but just not right away. So, a lot of Cyberpunk info that we got last week. I'm so excited to play this game. It's going to be such a game where you can play your own story and make it your character in so many different ways. And Paris talking about the world being very lived in, and there's so many things going on around you. And focus was put on the NPCs and what they have going on in their own little NPC life. So that game has a lot of potential, and I'm 100% going to get that day one. I talked last week about the delay because now it's November 19th, I believe, instead of September 17th. And I'm okay with that because I didn't want to play this huge, ambitious game on a current gen system right before next gen consoles launch. So I am actually happy with that. After that, we've got a Marvel's Avengers War Table stream recap. I'm getting this info from Michael McWhirter at Polygon. So War Table is what Crystal Dynamics is calling the gameplay streams for the game that's happening up to its release. The first one was last Wednesday, and we got a look at the main story, some single player and some co-op gameplay, and a little bit of customization. The main antagonist in the game is MODOK. Real name is George Tarleton. MODOK is the head of AIM, which is Advanced Idea Mechanics, which deploys its mechanized soldiers and robot creations under the guise of security after the Avengers disband. The story follows Kamala Khan as she sets out on a journey to reunite the fractured Avengers. We saw some gameplay from a story mission where players take control of Thor, who's dressed as his alter ego Donald Blake, as he helps the Avengers prevent the crash of the helicarrier known as the Chimera. Thor teams up with Hulk, Iron Man, Ms. Marvel, and Black Widow as MODOK taunts them, and MODOK also accuses Thor of being responsible for Captain America's death in the game. And wouldn't call that a spoiler because in the main trailer for the game, like at the announcement, they showed that Captain America supposedly died in the game. In the gameplay, we see Thor use ranged abilities and his ultimate ability, where he summons the Bifrost to break through enemy shields. They go very in-depth on what kinds of abilities the heroes have. They've got the normal basic attacks, offensive abilities, support abilities, and their ultimate. They also talk about how the different loot that you get can give you some different damage types, status effects, and other things like that, which can change up your playstyle. Which is good to hear because from what I saw here, it looks, kind of like the most basic level of fun a game can be, in my opinion, but hearing the loot can give you different playstyles is good to hear. And then we got to look at co-op war zones, which are repeatable cooperative missions that take place in wide open spaces or dense interiors, depending on the mission. And in these missions, players will take their customizable Avengers out for a spin, and each hero has dozens of unlockable cosmetic outfits, some of which can be earned by completing missions and objectives, and some of which will only be available through an in-game marketplace. So it's not anything that's going to change gameplay, but you can use real money to buy cosmetics in this game. And those outfits draw inspiration from classic comic books and Marvel Cinematic Universe designs. Unlockable powers and gear also draw from the various Marvel universes. And as players embark on co-op missions, they'll work with a variety of factions, including an Inhuman Resistance group and former S.H.I.E.L.D. members such as Nick Fury and Dum Dum Dugan, who, I don't know who that is, but I guess it's some big name in the Marvel lore in the comics somewhere down the line. And the article also says anyone who has played Destiny will find much of Marvel's Avengers faction interactions very familiar looking. So maybe like the Crucible or the Gunsmith or the Titan Vanguard or whatever else. And Marvel's Avengers will have a free upgrade for Xbox Series X and PS5. So again, overall it looks like fun, but as I said, like a very basic level of fun. I feel like I'd get bored after a few hours, but that's just me. I'm not going to go out and get this one day one, but for hardcore Marvel fans that do know the comics and everything like that, I think they will appreciate the amount of content, like outfits, heroes, and villains that they see that are from the comics in addition to the movies. So at least, if nothing else, I'm excited for the hardcore Marvel fans. Next piece of info I got is Mixer is being shut down. I'm getting the info from Cecilia D'Anastasio at Wired.com. So Microsoft's live streaming service will shut down on July 22nd and is, quote, teaming up with Facebook Gaming to give partnered Mixer streams a new home. In a post last week, Mixer said, quote, it became clear that the time needed to grow our own live streaming community to scale was out of measure with the vision and experiences that Microsoft and Xbox want to deliver for gamers now. So we decided to close the operations side of Mixer and help the community transition to a new platform. And one of the worst parts of this is partnered Mixer streamers said they had no idea this was happening until Microsoft announced it to everybody else. So it was kind of just out of nowhere. They just dropped that, hey, Mixer's going away. Sorry for the audience and the platform that you've built on Mixer. You're going to have to try and transition it to Facebook Gaming or start a new following on Twitch or something like that. So that really sucks for them, but I don't know. Mixer was promising, but didn't quite get there. The article continues, despite solid live streaming technology and top talent acquisitions like Ninja and Shroud, Mixer has struggled to keep up with competitors Twitch and YouTube. In April, viewers watched 37 million hours of gaming content on Mixer, to Twitch's 1.5 billion hours and YouTube's 461 million. And that's all according to data from streaming analytics company Arsenal.gg. So again, Twitch 1.5 billion hours, Mixer had 37 million. That is an unbelievable difference. And the year-over-year stats are not looking too good either. Between April 2019 and April 2020, hours watched on Twitch grew 101%, while Mixer's hours watched increased just 0.2%. Not good. Mixer has had the slowest growth possible, I think, which is very unfortunate. Streamers with partner status on Mixer will have partner status on Facebook Gaming if they choose to move over. On July 22nd, Mixer.com will redirect to fb.gg, which is Facebook's gaming website. Microsoft's cloud streaming service, Project xCloud, will also find a new home on Facebook Gaming, although we don't know what that will look like yet. So, I personally don't like the idea of xCloud being grouped in with Facebook Gaming, because a lot of people just don't like the way Facebook does things and don't like Facebook as a company. Hopefully, this goes better than we think it will. The only notable streamer that I know of on Facebook Gaming is Stone Mountain 64, which he's always been an awesome streamer, one of my favorites. And it seems like he's been doing just fine on Facebook Gaming. Hopefully, Mixer streamers that do decide to go with Facebook Gaming can find success there, because regardless of how people feel about Facebook, we still want Mixer streamers to succeed. And in a quote to The Verge, the head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, said, quote, it wasn't as much about return on sell, it was about finding a partnership that was the best things for the community and streamers. We think this is it, and it gives us a great place to launch more xCloud content and give gamers the ability to play from there. So, again, the whole thing is unfortunate because Mixer did sound pretty promising at the beginning and they were doing some really good things for their partners. They just didn't really have the means to develop a self-sustaining culture, and it's really sad to see. A little side note talking about streaming, this isn't a full-blown story I'm going to go into, but most people who pay attention to streamers heard that Dr. Disrespect was just banned from Twitch. The reason why hasn't been made public, which is kind of concerning, and everybody's wondering what exactly he did. He posted on Twitter yesterday, I record these on Sundays, that Twitch hasn't notified him of the specific reason that they banned him, so hopefully that's updated soon, but again, I don't need to get too far into that story. That's it for the gaming news, and going into gaming events happening this week. Not a whole lot. All I got is June 30th is IGN's Summer of Gaming Awards and After Party show. This is the last event of their Summer of Gaming event. It will have exclusive trailers, gameplay demos, developer interviews, a charity stream, and of course the awards and after party show. And going on to gaming deals, Xbox's games with gold for July are WRC8 FIA World Rally Championship, which is free from July 1st through the 31st. Dunk Lords is free July 16th through August 15th. Saints Row 2 is free July 1st through the 15th, and Juju is free July 16th through the 31st. Again, those are free to keep as long as you claim them within those timeframes. PlayStation's PS Plus games for July have not been announced yet because July is a weird month, so we'll probably see that in the next couple days. And Xbox still has their, you can get your first month of EA Access for $1, and that's until June 29th only on Xbox. Today, June 29th, is the last day for Xbox's Super Savings deal with up to 80% off games like Saints Row 4, Trials Rising, Batman Arkham Knight, and more. PlayStation has mid-year deals with up to 70% off games like The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and more until July 8th. There's a lot of good games in that deal. PlayStation still has their remasters and retro sale with up to 85% off older titles and remasters like the Crash Bandicoot and Insane Trilogy, Resident Evil games, older Grand Theft Auto games, and more. That deal ends July 2nd. I talked about that deal last week, including the Crash Bandicoot and Insane Trilogy, and I completely forgot about the deal and then bought the Insane Trilogy on my Switch instead. So I could have saved myself $20 there, but at least now I can play it when I'm not by my TV. And PlayStation's deal of the week is 75% off Diablo 3 Eternal Collection. That deal ends July 2nd. I put a ton of hours into that game. That's a great deal on a fantastic game if you like dungeon crawlers. Nintendo has a sale on Capcom's greatest hits with up to 70% off games like Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, Mega Man 11, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, and more. That deal ends July 2nd. Going on to new releases via Metacritic. In previous episodes, I've done games that came out last week and this coming week, but I'm just going to switch to games coming up this next week, so I'm not repeating a week of games in my episodes. I think that'll work a little bit better. So games that are coming out this week. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate gets a new fighter, Min Min, on June 29th for Switch. I accidentally restarted the USSR. It releases June 30th for PC. I have no idea how that game plays. I just like the name. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 3 releases June 30th for Switch. Minecraft Dungeons Jungle Awakens releases July 1st for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Biped releases July 2nd for Switch. And Marvel's Iron Man VR releases July 3rd for PSVR. That's another one PlayStation fans have been excited for. And going on to what have I been playing, so I did it finally. I beat The Last of Us Part 2. My thoughts on the game, where I'm at right now, is it's not one of my favorite games ever. It's still really good. It's just not that far up there for me personally. This week I will be listening to a couple spoiler casts about the game. The guys the crew at Kind of Funny did two different podcasts. They did one with just a few people from their company, and they did another podcast, spoiler cast, about the game with Neil Druckmann and Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, who are the game's creative director, the voice of Joel, and the voice of Ellie. So I am excited to get some input and context from the people that helped them make the game. I just want to get some other views and their input to get context and fully understand why certain decisions were made, because I know I probably wasn't able to fully appreciate the storytelling while I played it, because there was always the voice in my head being like, I gotta finish this game just to avoid spoilers. So I didn't rush through it. It still took me 26 hours to beat. But I still want to go over those spoiler casts and have some more input on it. I'm thinking about doing my own review or just having my own conversation about the game as a bonus episode, possibly next week. So I'll see how that goes and if I end up doing that. But after I beat The Last of Us Part 2, I went back to Destiny 2 again. I just felt like having another chill gameplay session for a couple weeks before Ghost of Tsushima comes out on July 17th, because that's going to be the next big game I plan on diving into. I'm very excited for that one too. So this has been your update 6.5 for June 29th, 2020. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube or for listening on podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want to get more frequent gaming news posts from me in between episodes, you can follow the show's page on Twitter at UpdateXShow. You can also give me any feedback or suggestions you have about the show while you're there. Outside of game news, I post some gaming clips sometimes on TikTok at The Only Rush, if you want to check that out. And I also go live there when I record my episodes, like I am right now. And my personal Twitter page is also at The Only Rush, where I post non-strictly news-related stuff. As always, thank you so much for choosing Update X for your gaming news. I'll see you next Monday morning. Have a great week.